The Aurora Crown Station did not orbit the blue gas giant below so much as it presided over it. The station was a colossal ring of spun titanium and diamond glass, a halo of artificial wealth crowning a planet of churning storms. From the approach vectors, the station looked like a piece of jewelry left behind by a negligent god, glittering with enough concentrated light to shame the distant stars. Neon banners, projected in hard light specifically to be visible from incoming shuttle lanes, unfurled across kilometers of vacuum. They pulsed with colors that did not exist in nature, advertising the event of the standard century, the Grand Gala auction. To the elites of the galaxy, this was a festival of power and beauty. To Ryan Hale, looking out the scuffed viewport of a transport shuttle, it looked like a gilded cage waiting for a bird stupid enough to fly inside. The traffic lanes were clogged with vessels that cost more than the GDP of the colony world Ryan had been born on. He watched a living ship, a bioengineered leviathan grown from void coral and pulsating with internal bioluminescence, drift past his shuttle. Beside it, a carriage made of transparent crystalline lattice was pulled by solar sail drones, carrying a delegation of high-born methane breathers. The comms channels were awash of encrypted chatter, a mix of investment jargon and casual, horrifying speculation. They spoke of acquiring spouses the way Ryan's old squad used to talk about acquiring new rifle scopes. They discussed bloodlines and genetic markers as if they were engine specs. Ryan adjusted the collar of his dress tunic, which was scratching the back of his neck. It was second-hand, purchased from a surplus store on a station 3 sectors back, and it smelled faintly of ozone and someone else's cologne. He felt like an imposter in his own skin. He was a human ex-soldier, a man who had spent the last 10 years hauling freight and dodging pirates in the ass end of the galaxy, not sipping nebula wine with warlords. "Come on, Ryan," his client said, nudging him in the ribs. The client, a corporate middle manager named Vex with oily skin and too many teeth, grinned at him. "Look at that view. You should be thanking me. Most pilots never get within sensing range of the crown. I am here to secure the transport contract for your mining equipment." "Vex," Ryan said, his voice flat. "You said the deal happens here. You did not say I had to play dress-up and attend a flesh market." Vex laughed, a wet, clicking sound. "It is not a flesh market, you uncultured grunt. It is the pinnacle of civilized diplomacy. These are political unions, strategic mergers. Besides, I needed a +1 to get into the VIP tier. Just stand there, look intimidating, and try not to embarrass me." The shuttle docked with a smooth, silent thud that spoke of magnetic clamps worth billions. Ryan followed Vex out onto the promenade, instantly assaulted by the sensory overload of the Aurora Crown. The air smelled of synthesized lilacs and money. The gravity was set to a comfortable, low-impact standard that made everyone move with an unnatural grace. The crowd was a nightmare of opulence. Ryan saw tycoons from the silica belt, their bodies encased in hovering mech suits of gold and platinum. He saw royal envoys from the aquatic worlds, floating in anti-grav bubbles filled with pristine salt water, their scales shimmering with jewels. Warlords from the fringe system strode through the crowd with ceremonial plasma blades at their hips, looking for weakness in the eyes of their competitors. Ryan kept his hands clasped behind his back, falling into the parade rest posture that had been beaten into him during basic training. He hated this. He hated the way they looked at each other, not as people but as walking bank accounts. He hated the way the air felt recycled and sterile, devoid of the grit and oil he was used to. But mostly, he hated the numbness in his own chest. 10 years ago, he had fought in the border wars, a conflict orchestrated by people exactly like this to secure mining rights on moons nobody lived on. He had watched friends die for a percentage point on a stock ticker. Now, he was walking among the architects of that misery, and he felt nothing but a cold, hollow exhaustion. He was too small to fight them. He was just a pilot trying to pay for fuel injectors. The system was a mountain, and he was not even a pebble. He was dust. They moved toward the auction hall, a circular amphitheater situated under a transparent dome at the very top of the station. The swirl of the galaxy was visible overhead, a billion stars staring down in judgment. The hall was designed to intimidate. The seating tiers were made of floating platforms that could be adjusted for height and comfort, ensuring that the richest bidders could literally look down on their competition. Holographic catalogs floated in the air before every seat. Vex grabbed his with greedy fingers, scrolling through the data. Rian ignored the one hovering in front of him until a stray movement of his hand activated it. A three-dimensional image of a woman from the Kepler systems rotated in the air. Beside her, columns of data cascaded downward. Genetic purity rating, fertility projections, estimated dowry value in helium-3 isotopes, predicted political influence rating. It turned his stomach. These were trophy wives in the most literal sense. High-status individuals, mostly women but some males and gender-fluid species, groomed from birth to be the ultimate diplomatic tools. Winning one meant securing trade lanes, military pacts, and cultural dominance. It was slavery dressed up in silk and sold as high society. Rian looked away, scanning the room for exits. Old habits died hard. He noted the security team stationed at the perimeter, heavy augmented guards with neural link rifles. He noted the blast doors disguised as decorative arches. He was calculating engagement distances before he even realized he was doing it. Ladies, gentlemen, and sentient entities of all classifications. A voice boomed, seeming to come from inside Ryan's own head. The lights dimmed, leaving only the starlight from the dome and the soft glow of the stage. In the center of the amphitheater, a figure materialized. It was the auctioneer, a high-end AI projection designed to be visually pleasing to every species simultaneously. It shifted forms subtly, appearing as a trusted elder to the humans, a sleek matriarch to the reptilians, and a cloud of harmonic resonance to the energy beings. "Welcome to the Grand Gala," the AI announced, its voice tuned to a frequency that triggered biological excitement markers in the brain. "Tonight, we reshape the galaxy. Tonight, empires are forged." The crowd rippled with anticipation. Vex leaned forward, practically drooling. "Here it comes," Vex whispered. "The main event. Forget the opening acts. Everyone is here for Lot Zero." Rian frowned. "Lot Zero?" The holoscreens in front of them flared, wiping away the previous data and replacing it with a single, high-resolution image. The text beneath it read, "Princess Elira of the Luminae, the star of the void, the unbroken light." The whispers in the crowd rose to a roar. Rian caught snippets of conversation from the row behind him. "They say her bloodline is pure energy conductive," a voice hissed. "Forget the bloodline. Think of the star lanes. The Luminae control the only stable wormhole route to the outer rim. Whoever wins her controls the shipping for the next 50 years. She is the last unmarried daughter. The Regency Council is desperate. They are selling her off to cover their war debts." Rian stared at the empty stage, a royal asset being liquidated. That was all she was to them. A balance sheet with a heartbeat. "Bring her out," a warlord shouted from the upper tier, his voice amplifying through a translator. The AI auctioneer smiled, a gesture that looked practiced and predatory. "We hear you. We understand your desire. Behold, the jewel of the evening, Lot 0. A pillar of light descended from the ceiling, striking the center of the stage. The light fractured, dissolving into sparkles of dust. And there she stood. Rian had planned to look at his boots. He had planned to close his eyes and think about engine diagnostics until this was over. But he found himself looking, and then he found himself unable to look away. Princess Elira was not merely beautiful. She was an event. Her skin possessed a soft, intrinsic luminescence, glowing like starlight striking the surface of a calm ocean. It was not a blinding light, but a gentle rhythmic pulse that seemed to sync with the beating of the hearts in the room. Her hair was a cascade of silver and violet, floating slightly as if she were underwater, reacting to unseen currents of air. She wore a gown that was a marvel of bioengineering. It was made of living petals, bioluminescent and reactive, shifting colors from deep indigo to pale rose depending on the ambient temperature. But it was her eyes that pinned Rian to his seat. They were faceted, reflecting light in complex geometric patterns, shifting colors like a nebula in fast forward. She stood perfectly still in the center of the stage, the focus of 10,000 greedy eyes. The AI began to rattle off her statistics. Empathic resonance rating, Class 5, diplomatic training, imperial standard, genetic compatibility, universal adapter. Rian watched her hands. They were clasped in front of her, resting against the flowing fabric of her gown. To the casual observer, she looked serene, a statue of regal composure. But Rian knew what fear looked like when it was shoved down into a box and locked tight. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the way the muscles in her neck were pulled taut. He saw the controlled, disciplined rhythm of her breathing. In, hold, out. In, hold, out. That was not the breathing of a socialite at a party. That was the breathing of a soldier in a drop pod, waiting for the doors to open into hell. She is terrified, Rian thought, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. She is terrified, and she is fighting it with everything she has. The bidding will start at 10 million credits. The AI announced smoothly. The number was obscene. It was enough to buy a small moon. But before the words had even faded, a light flashed in the upper tier. 20 million, a silica baron signaled. 30 million countered a corporate collective from the core worlds. 50 million, 100 million, and the numbers lost all meaning. They were just sounds, markers of an insanity that Rian could not comprehend. Private moons were thrown onto the table, entire standing armies. Mineral rights to star systems that had not even been fully charted yet. Elira stood in the center of it all, her expression unmoving. But Rian, watching with the intensity of a sniper, saw the subtle flick of her eyes. She was tracking the bids. Every time a new number flashed on the giant overhead screens, her gaze would dart toward it, and for a fraction of a second, the light in her skin would dim. It was as if every bid was a physical weight being added to her shoulders. Another layer of her autonomy being stripped away and sold for parts. Rian felt a slow, cold anger rising in his chest. It started in his gut and worked its way up, burning through the numbness he had carried for years. This was not business. This was a butchery of the soul. From the booth next to him, two masked noblewomen were whispering, their voices carrying over the low hum of the crowd. The consortium has engineered this perfectly, one said. The Regency Council had no choice. They destabilized the Lumini economy just to force this auction. Indeed, the other replied. She thinks she is doing this for her people, to save them from bankruptcy. She does not know the bankruptcy was manufactured. She is a sacrifice on an altar made of spreadsheets. Ryan gripped the railing of the balcony until his knuckles turned white. A conspiracy. Of course, it was always a conspiracy. The rich did not just buy power, they manufactured the desperation that made power cheap to acquire. The price on the screen hit 500 million credits. The room was feverish. The air felt thick with pheromones and greed. The AI auctioneer raised its hands, basking in the chaos. We are approaching record territory. But credits are so impersonal, are they not? Let us open the floor to novel bids. We will accept favors, vows, treaties, and secrets. Who will offer the princess something truly worthy of her lineage? This was the blood in the water. The sharks began to circle closer. I offer the deployment of the Third Armada to protect her homeworld, a warlord bellowed, slamming his fist on the railing. I offer exclusive wormhole technology that will triple her sector's trade velocity, a tech mogul shouted. I offer the heads of her family's political enemies. A voice from the shadows hissed. The atmosphere turned predatory. They were not just buying a wife anymore, they were buying a weapon, a key to the galaxy. And they were willing to tear the universe apart to get it. Ryan felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Vex. Relax. Hail. Vex chuckled, misreading the tension in Rian's body. You look like you're about to punch someone. Just enjoy the show. A human could never afford a prize like that, not in 1,000 lifetimes. Look at her. She is out of your league, out of your species, and out of your reality. Rian knocked Vex's hand away. He looked at the stage. At that exact moment, perhaps drawn by the sudden movement or the sheer intensity of Rian's glare, Princess Elira looked up. Her gaze cut through the holographic displays, through the dazzling lights, and locked onto Ryan. Time seemed to stutter. The roar of the crowd faded into a dull background hum. For a heartbeat, the regal mask she wore cracked. The serenity vanished, replaced by a flicker of wry, exhausted humor and a fragile, questioning spark. It was a look that spoke volumes, and it said, "This is ridiculous, is it not?" It said, "I am drowning in light, and no one sees me." It asked, "Do you see me, or just the light?" Rian felt his heart hammer against his ribs. He saw her. He saw the person beneath the bioluminescence and the politics. He saw someone trapped in a cockpit with the engines on fire, waiting for the crash. The AI auctioneer's voice boomed, shattering the moment. "We have heard the offers of fleets and fortunes. Are there any final bids? Speak now, or the auction concludes." Rian did not think. He did not calculate the odds. He did not consult his bank account, which contained exactly enough credits for a refueling stop and a cheap meal. He stood up. In the tiered seating of the amphitheater, the movement was conspicuous. He was a solitary figure in a cheap gray suit standing amidst a sea of gold and silk. The room fell quiet, the silence rippling outward from his section until the entire hall was hushed. Spectators craned their necks. The elite smirked, expecting a drunk outburst or a joke. The AI auctioneer turned its massive, projected head toward Ryan. It zoomed in, projecting Rian's face onto the smaller screens, revealing his scars and the stubble on his jaw. "We have a challenger from the lower tiers," the AI said, its voice dripping with amused condescension. "A human. Do you have a bid to register, sir? Or are you simply stretching your legs?" Vex was hissing at him, tugging frantically at his sleeve. "Hail! Sit down! You are going to get us killed! Sit down!" Rian ignored him. He looked past the AI. He looked past the warlords and the tycoons, and then he looked straight at Elira, who was watching him with wide, startled eyes. Her hands had tightened into fists at her sides. Ryan felt his throat tighten. This was insanity. This was suicide. But the anger in his gut had turned into something else, a clarity he had not felt since the war. "Every alien here is bidding millions," Rian said. His voice was not amplified, but the acoustics of the hall carried it to the rafters. He took a breath, and then he spoke the words that would end his life as he knew it. "I bid for the alien princess's smile," he said clearly, "freely given, not bought." The words hung in the air for a second, absolute and terrifying. The trophy wife auction began. Every alien bid millions. The human bid for the alien princess's smile. For 3 seconds, there was total silence. Then, the hall erupted. It was not applause. It was a wave of shocked laughter and derision. It started as a tittering in the VIP boxes and swelled into a roar of mockery. The warlord who had offered his army threw his head back and bellowed with laughter. The silica baron tapped his forehead, signaling that the human was mentally defective. Some were enraged, shouting that the human should be ejected for insulting the dignity of the event, an insult to tradition. Someone screamed, "Remove him! He mocks the crown!" Vex had buried his face in his hands, trying to make himself invisible. On stage, the AI auctioneer made a show of checking its databanks, playing up the absurdity for the crowd. A poetic sentiment, human. Unfortunately, poetry is not legal tender in this sector, if that is your only offer. I am afraid we must move to... Wait. The word was soft, but it stopped the AI mid-sentence. It was not the AI who spoke, it was the system itself. A deep, resonant chime echoed through the hall, a sound that had not been heard in the Aurora Crown for centuries. It was the sound of an override protocol. On the massive hollow screens, the numbers vanished. The images of fleets and credits dissolved. In their place, archaic lines of code began to scroll, glowing a fierce, urgent red. The AI flickered, its smooth persona glitching for a moment. Processing, accessing Imperial archives. Protocol 77 Alpha found. The crowd quieted, confused. Protocol? What protocol? Unexpectedly, a holographic interface appeared not in front of the auctioneer, but directly in front of Princess Elira. It hovered before her face, invisible to the crowd but clear to her. Deep in the auction's ancient foundational code written 1,000 years ago when the station was a place of honor, not commerce, was a forgotten clause. It was a safeguard, a relic of a time when the choice of the betrothed was technically, if rarely, respected. It stated that a candidate had the right to unilaterally choose among all valid bids, regardless of value, if a specific threshold of absurdity or insult had been reached by the other parties, or if a true vow was recorded. Elira stared at the interface. She saw the list of bids represented as cold streams of data, strategy, minerals, armies, conquest. They were heavy, suffocating things. Then she saw the last entry. It was highlighted in a simple, unadorned text. Bidder. Rian Hale, Terran. Offer, one unquantified human promise. A smile freely given. Value, undefined, infinite. Elira felt a jolt run through her nervous system. It was not the romance of the line that struck her. She was too cynical for fairy tales. It was the subversion of it. In a room where everyone wanted to own her, he had offered the one thing that required her to be free. You cannot own a smile that is freely given. To accept the bid was to reject the premise of the auction entirely. It was a crack in the cage. It was a weapon. The AI recovered. There seems to be a technicality. The human's bid has been registered as a valid non-monetary vow. Under the ancient charter, the choice now falls to the asset. The AI turned to Elira, its voice returning to its smug tone. Princess, Surely you can dismiss this jest so we may proceed with the real business. Which of these mighty empires do you select? The hall held its breath. They expected her to laugh. They expected her to wave the human away like a fly. Elira looked up. She looked at the warlords who wanted her genetic code. She looked at the tycoons who wanted her trade routes. She looked at the consortium agents in the shadows who wanted her soul. And then she looked at Ryan Hale, the man in the cheap suit who looked like he was regretting every life choice that had led him to this moment. She saw the fear in his eyes, but she also saw the stubborn set of his jaw. He had stood up for her, not for her title, but for her. Something in Elira's chest, a knot of duty and fear that had been tightening for years, suddenly snapped. She lifted her chin. The bioluminescence in her skin flared, turning from a soft blue to a blinding, defiant white. Her voice rang out, amplified by the station's acoustics, clear as a bell and sharp as a blade. I choose the human. The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of a heart stopping. Then, pandemonium. It was absolute chaos. A dozen warlords began shouting at once. Legal AIs materialized in the air, projecting conflicting interpretations of treaty law. Security alarms began to blare, bathing the room in pulsing red light. "This is illegal," the Regent Chancellor screamed from the royal box. "I forbid it." The auctioneer AI was stuttering. The choice is binding. Protocol 77 Alpha is absolute. The match is sealed. Rian stood frozen, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might crack a rib. He had expected to be thrown out. He had expected to be arrested. He had not expected to win. Vex was on the floor, curled into a ball, whimpering about liability clauses. On the stage, the force fields lowered. Guards in heavy armor began to push through the crowd, weapons drawn, though it was unclear if they were coming to arrest Ryan or protect the validity of the sale. Elira did not wait. She stepped off the podium. She walked down the steps of the stage, moving with a deadly, fluid grace. The crowd parted for her, terrified by the intensity of her light and the sheer impossibility of what was happening. She walked straight toward Ryan. Her eyes were blazing with a mix of emotions that he could not fully parse: fury at the situation, fear of the consequences, and a dangerous, burning curiosity. She stopped 2 meters from him. Up close, the glow of her skin was warm, radiating a heat that he could feel on his face. She looked at him, and for the first time, she did not look like a princess or a victim. She looked like someone who had just pulled the pin on a grenade and was waiting for him to catch it. "You are a fool, human," she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear over the screaming crowd. Ryan swallowed hard. "I have been told that often." She took a step closer, the petals of her gown brushing against his shins. "I hope you have a fast ship," she whispered. "Because you just started a war?" Rian looked at the guards closing in from the left. He looked at the furious delegates surging forward from the right. He looked at the alien princess standing before him, shining like a captured star. He finally let out a breath. "I have a ship," he said. "It is not fast, but it is leaving." The guards reached them. A heavy hand clamped onto Ryan's shoulder. Elira turned, her expression shifting instantly back to imperial command, but her hand moved, almost imperceptibly, to brush against his. The auction was over. The hunt had begun. The chaos that erupted in the Aurora Crown Amphitheater was not the panic of a riot, but the terrifying, structured bedlam of bureaucracy collapsing under its own weight. It was the sound of 1,000 years of tradition shattering in a single heartbeat. Ryan Hale stood at the epicenter of the storm, feeling strangely detached. Around him, the air shimmered with the projected avatars of legal AIs, appearing as towering figures of light and geometry. They screamed at one another in binary and high-speed trade languages, their voices overlapping into a deafening drone of litigation. "Objection," one avatar roared, its form oscillating red. "The human does not possess the requisite credit rating to maintain a royal asset." "Overruled," countered another, this one bearing the seal of the station's ancient charter. "Protocol 77 makes no mention of financial solvency. The choice is absolute." Rian felt a hand clamp onto his bicep. It was not a handshake. It was a vice grip. He looked down to see the armored gauntlet of a station guard, a hulking creature with hydraulic pistons hissing at its joints. "Move," the guard grunted, the voice amplified through a helmet speaker. Rian tried to plant his feet. "Where are you taking me?" "To the processing suite," the guard said, shoving him forward. "Unless you would prefer we throw you out the airlock for disrupting a galactic summit." "I prefer the suite," Rian said quickly. He was dragged, there was no other word for it, away from the podium. He caught a fleeting glimpse of Princess Elira being escorted by a separate phalanx of guards. She was not struggling. She walked with her head high, her luminous skin casting long, dancing shadows against the polished floor. But Ryan saw the way her eyes darted left and right, cataloging threats. She was already planning a war, and he was just trying to keep his footing. They were hustled out of the main hall and into a transit tube that shot them upward through the station's superstructure. The noise of the auction faded, replaced by the hum of magnetic lifts. Rian expected a cell. He expected damp walls, energy bars, and a summary execution in the morning. Instead, the lift doors slid open to reveal a corridor carpeted in deep crimson synthetic moss that felt like velvet under his boots. The walls were lined with real wood, an exorbitant luxury in space and soft. Golden light pulsed from hidden recesses. "Bridal Processing Suite Alpha," the guard announced, shoving Rian through a massive set of double doors. "Good luck, human. You are going to need it." The doors hissed shut behind him, the locking mechanism engaging with a sound like a bank vault ceiling. Rian stood in the center of the room and blinked. It was less a room and more a palace in miniature. The ceiling was a dome of smart glass that displayed a curated view of the nebula outside, filtering out the harsh radiation and leaving only the romantic swirls of purple and gold. Light curtains, cascading sheets of semi-solid photons, divided the space into intimate sections. The gravity here was dialed down to 90% of standard, making every movement feel floaty and graceful. It was a cage designed to look like paradise. A moment later, the secondary doors on the far side of the suite opened. Princess Elira stepped through, her escort retreating and sealing her in. The silence that stretched between them was heavier than the gravity of the gas giant below. Elira stopped in the center of the room, the living petals of her gown settling around her like nesting birds. She looked at Ryan. He looked at her. The absurdity of the situation seemed to expand until it filled the entire suite. Rian cleared his throat. He felt painfully underdressed in his cheap, rumpled suit. "So," he said, his voice scratching against the silence. "This is a nice room." Elira stared at him. Her eyes, those faceted jewels that shifted color with her mood, were currently a sharp, analytical violet. She walked around him, circling him like a predator inspecting a confused animal. "Reckless," she said. "I know," Rian replied. "I'm stupid," she added, completing her circle. "I know that too. Suicidal," she finished, coming to a stop directly in front of him. "You have painted a target on your back visible from 3 sectors away. Do you have a death wish, human? Or are you simply unable to do basic math?" Rian rubbed the back of his neck. I did not expect you to pick me. I thought I would make my point, get thrown out, and maybe get a free drink at the bar for the story. I did not think the system had a loophole for this. Elira studied him. She was looking for the lie. In her world, everyone lied. The warlords lied about their armies, the tycoons lied about their credits, the diplomats lied about peace. But Ryan's face was an open book of exhaustion and genuine panic. You offered the only bid that was not a transaction, she said quietly. She turned away, walking toward one of the light curtains and running a hand through it. The photons rippled around her fingers like water. Every other bid was a calculation. She continued. They looked at me and saw a key to a lock. They saw a trade route. They saw a broodmare for a dynasty. You looked at me and saw a person who might want to smile. It was either absurd freedom or a beautiful prison. I picked the absurd. Rian watched her. The glow of her skin had dimmed slightly, settling into a weary, soft blue. I meant it, though, Ryan said, about the smile. Elira looked back at him, a glint of reluctant amusement flickering in her eyes. Be careful. Ryan Hale. You might find that my smile is the most expensive thing you have ever bought. Before Rian could answer, the room itself interrupted them. Greetings. Happy couple, a voice chirped. A sphere of white light materialized in the center of the room, hovering at eye level. It was the suite's AI, its personality settings dialed up to an aggressively cheerful level that made Rian want to shoot it. Congratulations on your successful union, the AI exclaimed. I am Unit 7-4, your bridal concierge. I am here to facilitate the transition from acquisition to consummation. Rian and Elira both flinched. Consummation is not on the schedule, Rian said, stepping back. The AI ignored him, bobbing happily in the air. As per the platinum package included with royal assets, we offer a variety of bonding options to accelerate intimacy. Would you like to initiate pheromone enhancement? We can flood the room with a synthetic lust compound guaranteed to lower inhibitions by 80%. No! Ryan and Elira shouted at the exact same time. Understood, the AI said, sounding disappointed. Perhaps a neural link intimacy experience. We can synchronize your sensory input so you can feel exactly what the other partner is feeling. It is very popular for arranged political matches where attraction is statistically low. Elira stiffened. The idea of forced mental intrusion clearly hit a nerve. Disable all bonding protocols, she commanded, her voice turning to ice. We require no enhancements. The AI bobbed, processing manual override. Very well, but I must remind the owner that the contract stipulates a binding period. Would the owner like to review the rights of access? The AI drifted toward Rian, projecting a menu that looked disturbingly like a restaurant wine list, but for physical intimacy. Rian felt the heat rise in his face. He looked at Elira. She was watching him, her body tense, waiting. She had been trained for this. She had been raised knowing that one day she would be sold, and she had likely spent years steeling herself for the moment a stranger would claim his property. Rian turned to the AI. Listen to me. Unit 7-4. Delete those protocols. Burn them. If you suggest anything like that again, I will find your central processor and feed it to a trash compactor. The AI paused. That is a violation of warranty. Do it, Rian growled. The AI made a sad chiming sound. Protocols deleted. You are a very difficult customer. The sphere floated away to hover near the ceiling, sulking. Ryan let out a breath and ran a hand through his hair. He looked at Elira and found her standing much closer than she had been a moment ago. The air in the room felt suddenly thin, The artificial twilight, the scent of her luminous skin, which smelled like ozone and crushed wildflowers, and the adrenaline of the escape were mixing into a dangerous cocktail. Rian was a soldier, but he was also a man. Elira was objectively the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. The way the light played under her skin was hypnotic. The sheer physical reality of her, standing there in a gown that seemed to breathe with her, was overwhelming. His body was reacting with a traitorous, pounding desire that he had to physically fight to suppress. Elira saw it. She took a step closer. She was testing him. She reached out, her fingers grazing the rough stubble on his jaw. Her skin was warm, vibrating with a low-level energy that made his nerves sing. "You own the contract, Rian," she whispered, her voice devoid of emotion. "You have the right." That is what the AI said. Rian's pupils dilated. He could feel the heat radiating from her. It would be so easy. The world expected it. The contract allowed it. He reached up and took her hand. His grip was firm, his calloused fingers wrapping around her delicate, glowing ones. Then, gently, he pulled her hand away from his face and released it. "I do not own you," Rian said, his voice rough but steady. "I bought a moment of chaos. Elira. I did not buy a person." Elira blinked, her hand hovering in the air where he had released it. She looked confused. She had braced herself for aggression. She had braced herself for transactional lust. She had not braced herself for respect. "You want to," she said. It was not a question. She could read the micro-expressions on his face. Rian met her gaze. "Yes, I do. You are beautiful. And I am not dead. But I will not touch you. Not unless you truly, freely want it. And right now, you are just trying to survive." Elira lowered her hand. She took a step back, putting distance between them. The confusion in her eyes deepened, mixed with something that looked like fear. "Why?" she asked. "Because where I come from," Rian said, leaning against a pillar. "If you have to force it, it is not worth having. And I am tired of fighting wars I did not choose. I am not going to start one in this room." Elira stared at him for a long moment. His self-control rattled her more than any grab for power could have. If desire was a weapon, she knew how to parry it. But this was raw, mutual, and restrained. It made her feel seen, and that was terrifying. The tension was thick enough to choke on until the AI, apparently bored with its exile on the ceiling, drifted back down. "I have detected a spike in emotional confusion," the AI announced helpfully. "Would you like me to play a tutorial video titled, 'So You Have Just Bought a Sentient Being, a Guide to Etiquette'?" Rian and Elira looked at the AI, then at each other. The sheer, banal horror of the suggestion was so absurd that the tension snapped. "No!" they shouted in unison again. They looked at each other, and a short, surprised laugh escaped Elira's lips. It was a rusty sound, like a bell that had not been rung in years. Rian chuckled, shaking his head. "We are going to have to kill that robot," Rian said. "I agree," Elira said, a small, genuine smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "It is the first thing we have agreed on." They moved to the seating area, a crescent-shaped couch that floated slightly above the floor. A holographic sphere hovered above an obsidian table. The contract. "We need to see what we are dealing with," Elira said, her business mask sliding back into place. She waved her hand, and the sphere expanded, filling the air with dense lines of legal text. "On the surface, it looks standard," she said, her eyes scanning the text at a speed Rian could barely follow. "Transfer of residency. Transfer of political proxy. You hold my voting rights in the Galactic Senate. That is what they were really bidding for. Rian squinted at the floating text. What is this clause here? Subsection 9. The lettering is different. Elira zoomed in on the section, her brow furrowed. That is odd. It is a redundancy clause. It states that in the event of the owner's death or incapacitation, custody of the asset does not revert to the family, but to a third-party guarantor designated as the Consortium of Harmony. She looked up, her light pulsing with a cold rhythm. I have studied the royal marriage rites since I was a child. That clause has never been there. The reversion always goes to the next of kin. Who is the Consortium of Harmony? Rian asked. I do not know, Elira said, and that is what frightens me. This contract was altered. Someone knew there was a chance I might end up in unpredictable hands, and they built a trapdoor to ensure they get me back. Before Rian could ask more, the room's communication grid lit up. A priority override signal slashed through the serene atmosphere. Incoming transmission. The AI announced, Priority Alpha 1. It is the Regent Chancellor. The air in the center of the room twisted, coalescing into the life-sized image of an elderly Lumine male. He was tall, his light dimmed by age to a muddy gray, and he wore the heavy jeweled robes of the High Office. His face was twisted in fury. Elira, the Regent roared. What madness is this? Elira stood up, her posture instantly shifting to that of a queen. She clasped her hands before her. Chancellor. I was merely exercising my rights under the Charter. You have humiliated us, the Regent spat. The delegation from the Kepler systems has already threatened an embargo. The warlords are demanding blood. You will annul this farce immediately. The human will be compensated or disposed of, and we will reset the auction. I cannot, Elira said calmly. The choice is made. Protocol 77 is binding. Damn the protocol, the Regent shouted, his composure cracking. You do not understand what is at stake. The backers, they will not be pleased. We promised them the trade routes. We promised them you. Backers? Elira asked sharply. Since when does the throne answer to backers, Chancellor? The Regent froze, realizing he had said too much. His eyes darted to Rian, then back to Elira. You are playing a dangerous game, child. This human cannot protect you. Annul the choice. Return to the stage, or you will see your precious autonomy burn along with that pilot. The transmission cut out, leaving a ringing silence in the room. Elira stood still, her light flickering rapidly. He is terrified, she whispered. The Regent is a tyrant, but he is never frightened. Whoever these backers are, they own him. Rian looked at the contract sphere, then at Elira. He realized then that he had not just saved a damsel from a bad marriage. He had stepped into the middle of a coup. He is not just a victim, Rian thought, watching her mind work. She is a strategist. She just provoked the most powerful man in her government to reveal his hand. We need to rest, Rian said, breaking the silence. We cannot fight a conspiracy if we are dead on our feet. Elira nodded, the adrenaline finally beginning to fade, leaving her looking small and exhausted. They turned to the sleeping quarters. The AI, in its infinite wisdom, had prepared the room based on the auction results. There was one bed. It was an enormous circular thing draped in silks and hovering on an anti-grav field, but it was still just one bed. Of course. Rian sighed. Elira looked at the bed, then at Rian. The tension from earlier returned, but it was softer now, weary. I will take the floor, Rian said immediately. He walked over to the decorative seating area and grabbed a pile of silk pillows. Rian, Elira said. The bed is large enough. You do not have to. I am taking the floor. Elira. Rian began arranging the pillows into a makeshift nest near the viewport. I have slept in mud, in cargo holds, and once in the intake valve of a reactor. A carpeted floor in a billionaire's suite is an upgrade. He took off his jacket and folded it into a pillow. He loosened his tie and lay down, turning his back to the bed. Elira watched him for a long moment. She felt a strange twisting in her chest. Relief. Certainly. She did not have to defend her boundaries. But underneath the relief was a sting of something else. Rejection? No, that was not it. It was the confusion of being treated with a deference she had never experienced. She climbed into the massive bed, the silks cool against her skin. She dimmed her own bioluminescence until she was a soft, pale glow in the darkness. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the station's life support. Rian. Elira's voice was a whisper in the dark. Yeah? Why did you do it? Really? Rian stared out the viewport at the stars swirling above them. He thought about the war. He thought about the faces of the men he had lost. He thought about the gray, grinding numbness of his life since the discharge. I was a soldier for a long time, Rian said quietly. I saw a lot of bad things. I saw whole cities burn because some rich man wanted a better price on copper. You forget what good things look like. He shifted, looking at the reflection of the nebula on the glass. I have not seen an honest smile in 10 years. Elira. Not a real one. Everyone is selling something. Everyone is afraid. When I saw you on that stage, you looked like I felt trapped. I just wanted to see you free enough to give a smile that was not paid for. That is all. Elira lay in the dark, her eyes wide open. She replayed his words in her mind. I just wanted to see you free. A warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with her biology. It was a deep, aching longing. For her entire life, her value had been measured in what she could provide. Power, legitimacy, heirs. The idea that someone simply wanted her happiness, with no return on investment, felt like a foreign language she was desperate to learn. She turned her head to look at his sleeping form on the floor. Thank you, she whispered. Rian did not answer. His breathing had already evened out into the light sleep of a soldier. Elira closed her eyes, allowing herself to drift. It was the flicker that woke her. It was not a sound. It was a change in the electromagnetic field of the room. Her species was sensitive to energy, and she felt the shift before she saw it. She opened her eyes. The containment field over the main door, the one that was supposed to keep them safe, stuttered. A pattern of static washed over the control panel. It was not a malfunction, it was a hack. Someone was overriding the lock from the outside. Elira sat up, her heart hammering against her ribs. The warmth of the moment before vanished, replaced by cold dread. Rian, she hissed. Rian was awake instantly. He did not groan or stretch. He simply rolled from his back to a crouch in one fluid motion, a pistol that he had managed to smuggle in via an ankle holster already in his hand. What is it? He whispered. Elira pointed at the door. The lights on the panel turned from red to green. The locking mechanism disengaged with a soft, treacherous click. They are coming, Elira whispered, sliding out of bed and grabbing a heavy decorative vase from the nightstand. Who? Rian asked, moving to the side of the doorframe, checking the charge on his weapon. The consortium, she said, her voice trembling with the realization. They are not coming to welcome us. Rian, they are coming to erase this mistake. The doors began to slide open. The bridal processing suite plunged into darkness. The soothing ambient light of the nebula simulation vanished, replaced instantly by the strobing, angry crimson of emergency alert beacons. The gentle hum of the life support systems was drowned out by the metallic thud of blast doors attempting to seal and failing as a manual override code chewed through their logic circuits. Rian was already moving. He kicked the pile of pillows he had been sleeping on across the room, scattering them to create visual noise, and rolled behind the heavy obsidian table where the contract sphere still hovered, now flickering erratically. Elira did not scream. Instead, she reached into the folds of her living gown. Her fingers found a small, hardened node of bioluminescent tissue, a control cluster woven into the dress's genetic structure. She pressed her thumb into it, hard. A low hum emanated from the fabric, followed by a sharp crackle of static. The gown, which had been programmed with bride compliance emitters designed to release calming pheromones and limit her range of motion during stress, suddenly went slack. The heavy, dragging weight of the petals lifted, the fibers tightening into a combat-ready mesh. "Compliance disabled," Elira whispered, her voice tight. She had worn this dress to be sold, but she had modified it to survive. From the breached outer corridor, shadows poured in. They were not station security. These figures moved with the silent, fluid efficiency of high-end corporate assassins. They wore matte black armor that drank the red emergency light, and their helmets were featureless save for a single glowing symbol on the forehead, 3 interlocking rings. "The Consortium of Harmony," Elira hissed, recognizing the insignia from the altered contract. "We have a kill order on the human," a distorted voice commanded from the lead intruder. "Secure the asset. Reset her memory to pre-auction baseline." Ryan popped up from behind the table. "Reset this," he snarled. He fired 3 shots from his concealable pistol. The rounds were low-velocity kinetic slugs, all he could smuggle in. But at this range, they hit hard. 2 sparked harmlessly off the lead operative's shields. But the third caught a joint in the armor, sending the assassin stumbling back. It was not enough. There were 5 of them, and they were advancing with overlapping fields of fire. "Use the room!" Rian shouted, diving as a plasma bolt scorched the air where his head had been a second ago. He scrambled toward a service alcove where a cleaning drone was docked. He jammed his fingers into its maintenance panel, ripping out the safety limiter wire. With a grunt of effort, he kicked the drone toward the attackers. "Cleaning cycle initiated," the drone chirped cheerfully, spinning its industrial-grade scrubbers up to lethal speeds and charging blindly into the shins of the second operative. The assassin cursed, stumbling as the drone tried to wax his boots with extreme prejudice. Elira, meanwhile, was not hiding. She stood in the center of the room, her bioluminescence pulsing with a chaotic, strobe-light rhythm. She closed her eyes and extended her mind. The consortium operatives were disciplined, their minds shielded by training and tech. But fear was a universal frequency. Elira found the tiny, buried kernels of anxiety in their psyches. The fear of failure, the fear of the dark, the fear of the unknown, and she poured energy into them. To the operatives, the room suddenly felt wrong. The distance to the target seemed to stretch and warp. The shadows in the corners grew teeth. "Target is displacing," one operative shouted, firing wildly to the left of where Ryan actually was. "My depth perception is glitching." "It is not a glitch," the leader barked, shaking his head as if to clear a fog. "The asset is using psi tactics. Suppress her!" 2 operatives broke off to rush Elira. Rian saw them move. He vaulted over a sofa, tackling the first one mid-stride. They crashed into a display of rare crystal vases, shattering them in a shower of glittering shards. Rian used the momentum to drive his elbow into the operative's helmet seal, cracking the visor. The second operative reached Elira, raising a stun baton. Elira did not flinch. She waited until the weapon was inches away, then sidestepped with a fluidity that made her look like a phantom. As the operative's momentum carried him past, she reached out and touched the back of his neck. She did not use force. She used a focused blast of pure, unfiltered panic. The operative screamed, dropping the baton and clawing at his helmet, overwhelmed by a sudden, crushing sensation of claustrophobia. He fell to his knees, gasping for air that his suit was perfectly supplying. Rian finished his opponent with a precise strike to the throat and rolled to his feet, panting. He looked at Elira. She was glowing so brightly now that it hurt to look at her, her eyes blazing with terrifying power. "Remind me never to make you angry," Ryan said, grabbing the stun baton from the floor. "Likewise," Elira replied, though her hand trembled slightly as she smoothed her gown. The station's PA system crackled to life. "Attention. A localized incident has been reported in the VIP sector. Please remain calm. Security teams are en route to contain the disturbance." "Contain," Elira said, reading the subtext. "They are locking down the sector. If the consortium gets reinforcements, we are trapped. We need to move," Rian said. "My ship is in Bay 94. Can we get there?" "Not through the hallways," Elira said, glancing at the blast doors which were now glowing white-hot as the intruders on the other side began to cut through. "We have to go down." She pointed to a ventilation grate near the floor. It was small, dusty, and definitely not designed for royal egress. Ryan grinned, a sharp, dangerous expression. "After you, Your Highness." They kicked out the grate and slid into the maintenance shafts. The tunnel was cramped, a tangle of conduits and fiber-optic cables that smelled of ozone and recycled air. Rian took the lead, crawling on his elbows, with Elira close behind. The space was so tight that Elira had to press herself against Ryan's back whenever they paused to check for sensor drones. She could feel the heat of his body through his shirt. He could feel her breath, warm and quick, on the back of his neck. Behind them, the sound of boots echoed in the metal shafts. Micro-drones buzzed like angry hornets, scanning the tunnels with red laser grids. "Left," Elira whispered, sensing the electronic signature of a patrol ahead. Rian hauled himself to the left, tumbling into a vertical shaft marked 0G Waste Disposal. He grabbed a ladder rung to stop his fall, reaching out with his other hand to catch Elira as she dropped in after him. The gravity plating cut out instantly. They were floating in the center of a wide, cylindrical tube that stretched down into the dark bowels of the station. Ryan's hand caught Elira's waist to steady her. The momentum of her entry caused them to spin slowly in the void. Her body drifted against his. The contact was electric, in the silence of the shaft, suspended between the chaos above and the unknown below. Everything else fell away. The danger, the assassins, the politics, it all vanished, leaving only the sensation of her form against his. Rian looked at her. Her face was inches from his. Her luminous markings had brightened in response to the adrenaline, casting a soft, violet light onto his features. Her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. He could feel her heart beating against his chest, a frantic rhythm that matched his own. His hand tightened instinctively on her waist, not to restrain her, but to hold on to the only solid thing in a spinning world. Elira stared at him. She saw the sweat on his brow, the grim set of his mouth that had softened into something vulnerable. She felt the raw, magnetic pull of him, not a command to be obeyed, but a question asking to be answered. For a heartbeat, they hung there, suspended in 0G and undeniable attraction. The urge to close the distance, to bridge the final inch between their lips, was a physical ache. Elira pulled back first. She pushed gently against his chest, putting a few inches of space between them. Her cheeks were glowing a furious, embarrassed pink. Biochemical feedback, she muttered, refusing to meet his eyes. Adrenaline response. Perfectly normal. Rian blinked, his brain slowly coming back online. Right. Feedback. Just chemicals. He cleared his throat, but his voice cracked. He looked like a man who had just touched a live wire and liked it. Elira smirked, a tiny, triumphant expression that she could not suppress. You are flushed, human. It is hot in here. Ryan lied. A soft, whirring sound interrupted them. A maintenance drone, shaped like a floating trash can with arms, drifted out of a side panel. It scanned them, its single blue eye blinking. Unsafe proximity detected, the drone stated in a monotone. Station regulations recommend the use of a dual-occupant safety harness for couples engaged in zero-gravity intimacy. Dispensing harness now. A tangled mess of nylon straps ejected from the drone's chassis, floating toward them like a giant squid. Rian stared at the harness. Elira stared at the harness. Are you serious? Ryan asked the drone. Safety is mandatory, the drone replied. Rian looked at Elira, and the absurdity of it broke them. They both burst into shaky, hysterical laughter. It was the laughter of people who had almost died and were now being lectured on safety by a trash can. Let us get out of here before I shoot the maintenance staff too. Rian gasped, wiping a tear from his eye. They pushed off the walls, using the 0G to descend rapidly toward the docking ring. They burst out of a service hatch into Cargo Bay 94. The vast hangar was filled with the smell of coolant and burnt fuel. In the center of the bay sat the Wayfarer's Folly. It was an ugly ship. It looked like a brick that had been welded to a larger, angrier brick. The hull was scarred from micrometeors and blaster fire, and the paint job was a patchwork of gray primer and rust. But to Ryan, it was the most beautiful thing in the galaxy. There she is, Ryan said. She is not pretty, but she flies. Not so fast, a voice shouted. Blocking the ramp to the ship was Vex, Ryan's client. The corporate manager was flanked by 2 hired security droids. His face was purple with rage. You ruined everything, Vex screamed, waving a data pad. The contract, the mining deal. Do you know how much money I just lost? You are fired, Hale. You are worse than fired. I am placing a lien on your ship. I am. Elira stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. She did not draw a weapon. She simply expanded her aura. She projected the full weight of her royal lineage, amplified by her empathic ability to project authority. To Vex, she suddenly seemed 10 feet tall. The air around him felt heavy, crushing, as if the gravity had been dialed up to a lethal degree. He felt a sudden, profound awareness of his own insignificance. He felt the crushing weight of his greed not as ambition, but as a hollow, rotting sickness in his gut. Vex faltered. His hands began to tremble. He dropped the data pad. Get out of my way, Elira said softly. Vex scrambled backward, tripping over his own feet. The security droids, sensing their employer's panic, powered down their weapons in confusion. Rian looked at Elira, impressed. Remind me never to owe you money. They ran up the ramp. Rian hit the seal button before he even reached the cockpit. Strap in. Ryan shouted, throwing himself into the pilot's seat. He began flipping switches with the practice speed of a musician. Reactor online. Shields up. Inertial dampeners. Mostly working. Elira strapped herself into the co-pilot's chair. She looked at the console, her hands flying over the interface. I am reading 3 consortium interceptors launching from the upper pylons. They are locking missiles. Hold on, Rian said, grinning as the engines roared to life. This is going to get bumpy. The Wayfarer's Folly blasted out of the hangar bay. tearing through the atmospheric retention field in a shower of sparks. Rian did not fly in a straight line. He threw the ship into a corkscrew spin, dodging the first volley of plasma fire from the station's defense turrets. The view screen was a chaotic blur of the station's rotating ring, the blue gas giant below, and the streaks of laser fire cutting through the void. "They are closing the blast shutters on the exit vector," Ryan shouted. "We are going to be trapped inside the ring." "No," Alira said, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "There is a gap. Sector 4, coordinates 339. It is a blind spot in the sensor grid used by royal couriers for covert entry. Go there. Now!" Rian did not question her. He banked the ship hard to the left, straining the structural integrity field. Metal groaned, but the ship held. They dove toward a section of the ring that looked like solid metal. "Trust me," Alira yelled. At the last second, a hidden hangar door slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel through the station's superstructure. Rian threaded the needle, shooting through the gap with only meters of clearance on either side. They burst out into open space, the stars spreading out before them like a field of diamonds. Punching it! Ryan slammed the FTL lever forward. The stars elongated into streaks of light. The ship shuddered violently, then slipped into the shimmering fold of hyperspace. The roar of the engines faded to a steady, rhythmic thrum. Silence descended on the cockpit. Rian slumped back in his chair, exhaling a breath he felt like he had been holding for an hour. "We made it." Alira did not relax. She was staring at the comms panel. "We are tagged," she said quietly. "The consortium has issued a galaxy-wide fugitive warrant. Bounty hunters, mercenaries, privateers. They will all be looking for this ship, and my face is on every news feed from here to the core worlds." Rian spun his chair around to face her. "Then we find a hole and we hide. There are backwater worlds in the outer rim where nobody asks questions. We can lay low for a few years." "No," Alira said, unbuckling her straps and standing up. "Hiding is what they want. If we hide, they win." She began to pace the small cockpit, her gown rustling softly. Why was the contract altered? Rian, why was the Regent so terrified? Why did the consortium send a kill team the moment I made a choice they did not approve of? Rian frowned. "Because they lost money." "No," Alira said, turning to him. "It is not just money. It is the system." She hesitated, looking at her hands. "The trophy wife auctions. Everyone thinks they are just about politics. Marrying a Luminae princess gets you trade routes. Marrying a Kepler baroness gets you mineral rights. But that is the cover story." She looked up, her eyes dark with a terrible realization. "My species is empathic. We can sense emotions, we can influence them. The consortium has been training us, enhancing those abilities for generations." Rian went still. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that if you put a Luminae bride next to a high chancellor, or a general, or a king, over time, she can shape his mind. She can soothe his anger when he should be fighting. She can amplify his fear when he should be brave. She can make him trust people he should hate." She took a shaky breath. "They are not selling wives, Rian. They are selling psychic steering wheels for entire governments. The Consortium of Harmony. They want to harmonize the galaxy by controlling the people who run it. And I was supposed to be their masterpiece." Rian stared at her. The horror of it settled over him. It was imperialism without armies. It was slavery disguised as marriage, used to enslave entire civilizations. "So when you chose me," Rian said slowly. "I broke the chain," Alira whispered. "I chose a nobody, a pilot with no army to lead and no planet to rule. I became useless to them. That is why they tried to erase the mistake. Rian looked out at the swirling tunnel of hyperspace. He felt a sudden, fierce protectiveness swell in his chest. "You are not useless," he said roughly. Elira walked over to stand behind his chair. She placed a hand on the back of the headrest, close to his shoulder but not touching him. "I chose you because of the bid," she admitted softly. "But there was another reason." She looked at his reflection in the dark glass of the viewport. "When you looked at me on that stage, Rian, you were the only one who did not look at me like I was a weapon. You looked at me like I was just a girl who was in trouble." Rian turned his head slightly, looking up at her. The cockpit was dim, lit only by the control panels. Her light was soft now, a gentle, comforting presence. The tension returned, but it was different this time. It was heavy with the weight of what they knew. The desire was still there. The pull between them was undeniable. But it was complicated by the massive power imbalance and the terrifying reality of her abilities. If I touch her, Rian thought, is it because I want to? Or because she is unconsciously making me want to? If he touches me, Elira thought, will he eventually resent me? Will he wonder if his feelings are real? They stayed like that for a long moment, suspended in the silence of the ship and the noise of their own thoughts. A piercing shriek from the console shattered the mood. "Proximity alert!" Rian spun back to the controls. Something massive had dropped out of hyperspace directly behind them. It was impossible. You could not track a ship in the fold unless you had a beacon on board. "Ryan, look at the signature," Elira cried. On the tactical display, a sleek, predatory silhouette appeared. It was moving faster than anything Ryan had ever seen. It was not just following them. It was hunting them. The comms channel crackled open. A voice, distorted by digital filters, filled the cockpit. It was cold, metallic, and devoid of mercy. "Return the asset," the voice commanded. "And we might let the human live." Rian slammed his hand onto the throttle, but the hunter ship matched them move for move. "They are locking weapons!" Rian shouted. Elira gripped the back of his chair, her knuckles white. "They found us? How did they find us?" Rian did not answer. He just gritted his teeth and prepared to dive into the unknown. The hunt was not over. It had just escalated. The veiled expanse was not empty space. It was a cosmic soup of charged particles, hallucinating gases and colossal drifting organisms that fed on starlight. It was a graveyard for sensors and a nightmare for navigators, which made it the only place Ryan Hale could think to run. The Wayfarer's folly shuddered as it punched through the outer membrane of the nebula. The cockpit was instantly bathed in a shifting, aqueous light, greens that tasted like copper, violets that hummed in the teeth. "Hold on!" Rian shouted, fighting the yoke as a gravitational eddy tried to flip the ship end over end. Behind them, the consortium hunter ship carved through the clouds. It was a sleek, silver predator, unbothered by the turbulence, its tracking beams cutting through the interference like needles. "They are still with us," Elira called out from the co-pilot's seat. Her hands hovered over the sensor array, which was currently screaming static. "My sensors are useless. They are jamming us, or the nebula is—" Rian gritted his teeth. "I cannot fly blind in this. I need a line." "Elira, use me," she said. She unbuckled her restraints and stepped behind his chair. She placed her hands on his shoulders. Her touch was firm, grounding, but he felt the tremble in her fingers. "I can feel the life forms in the cloud," she whispered, her voice sounding strange, layered. "I can feel the intent of the ship behind us. Let me guide you." Rian nodded, closing his eyes for a fraction of a second to center himself. "Do it." Elira closed her eyes and expanded her aura. She did not push her will onto Ryan. She opened a door between them. The connection was instant and overwhelming. Rian gasped. Suddenly, he was not just looking at the view screen, he was feeling the space around them. The nebula was not gas, it was a choir of biological hunger and drifting peace. The hunter ship behind them was a cold, sharp spike of malice, a mathematical intent to destroy. Left! Elira's voice was in his ear and in his mind simultaneously. Ryan banked hard left, narrowly missing a tendril of superheated plasma that erupted from a nearby star nursery. The hunter ship fired, a lance of energy that scorched the hull plating. Rian felt Elira's flinch as if it were his own. He felt her fear, cold and sharp, but beneath it he felt something else. Steel, a disciplined royal core that refused to break. And deeper still, he felt a vast, echoing loneliness. It was the loneliness of a statue in a museum, admired by millions but touched by no one. It broke his heart even as he fought to keep them alive. "Dive," Elira commanded. "There is a gravity well ahead, a heart." Ryan saw it or felt it, a dense knot of pulsating biological matter the size of a moon beating like a drum in the center of the cloud. It was generating a gravity well strong enough to crush a cruiser. "We are going to slingshot?" Rian shouted over the roar of the engines. "That is insane." "Trust the rhythm," Elira whispered. She tightened her grip on his shoulders. The boundary between their nervous systems blurred. Rian could feel her pulse syncing with his. He could feel the precise moment she calculated the turn. "Now!" Rian slammed the throttle forward and threw the ship into the gravity well. The G-forces hit them like a physical blow. The ship groaned, metal screaming in protest. They whipped around the pulsating heart of the nebula, skimming the event horizon of its crushing grip. The hunter ship, relying on logic algorithms rather than intuition, reacted a microsecond too late. It tried to correct, but the gravity well caught it. Rian watched on the rear monitor as the silver predator was yanked off course, tumbling uncontrollably into the dense, crushing depths of the cloud. "We are clear!" Ryan shouted, pulling back on the stick as they shot out the other side of the well, spiraling into the open, star-dusted void beyond. He slumped back in his chair, adrenaline crashing through his system. He reached up to cover Elira's hand on his shoulder. Her skin was burning hot. She pulled away sharply, stumbling back against the bulkhead. Ryan spun the chair around. "Elira?" She was leaning against the wall, chest heaving, her bioluminescence flickering erratically. Her eyes were wide, staring at him with a mix of awe and terror. That was too close, she whispered. "Not the ship, us." Ryan felt it too. The phantom sensation of her mind was still echoing in his. He could still feel the ghost of her fear and the sharp, shocking taste of her trust. It was intimate in a way that made his skin prickle. "We are alive," Ryan said, his voice rough. "That is what matters." Elira nodded, but she did not look at him. She smoothed her gown, her hands shaking. "We need to land. We need to disappear." Ragged Eden lived up to its name. It was a space station cobbled together from the carcasses of old warships and hollowed-out asteroids, drifting in the shadow of a brown dwarf. It was a place where people went to be forgotten. Rian docked the Wayfarer's Folly in a bay that smelled of urine and ozone. Before they disembarked, he rummaged through his lockers. "You cannot go out like that," he said, gesturing to her glowing petal-woven gown. "You look like a walking target." Elira accepted the bundle of clothes he offered, oversized mechanic's coveralls, a heavy flight jacket, and a scarf to cover her neck markings. She retreated to the small, fresher unit to change. When she emerged, Ryan stopped checking his pistol and stared. The clothes were hideous. They were stained, ill-fitting, and drab. And yet, she looked spectacular. The rough fabric only emphasized the delicate line of her jaw. The scarf framed her eyes, making their shifting colors even more striking. She looked like a queen masquerading as a pauper, which, he supposed, was exactly what she was. "Does it work?" she asked, tugging self-consciously at the heavy collar. "Do I look like a pilot?" Rian cleared his throat, looking away to hide the sudden heat in his face. "You look inconspicuous enough. Keep your head down." They made their way through the station's corridors, which were crowded with smugglers, refugees, and species Rian could not even identify. He kept a protective hand near the small of her back, scanning every face for recognition. When they entered the rusty piston, a cantina built into an old engine turbine, the room went quiet. It was not the clothes. It was the way she moved. Elira walked with a natural, fluid grace that screamed high-born. Every head turned, even in grease-stained coveralls. She commanded the room. Rian stepped in front of her, glaring at a table of staring Rhodian mercenaries. "Keep walking," he growled. He guided her to a booth in the back, his irritation mixing with a strange, fierce pride. "She is with me," he thought, and then immediately chastised himself. "She is a fugitive, you idiot. Not a date." A woman slid into the booth opposite them before they had even settled. She was human, with a face that looked like a roadmap of bad decisions and a cybernetic eye that whirred softly. "You are loud," the woman said, her voice like gravel. "For people trying to hide." "Kaylee," Rian said, relaxing slightly. "You are looking terrible." "You are looking like a dead man walking," Kaylee shot back. She turned her mechanical eye toward Elira. "And you are glowing, even under that jacket." Elira pulled the scarf tighter. "I am trying to dampen it." "You are Princess Elira," Kaylee said flatly. "Lot 0. I saw the auction feed. Everyone did. It was the funniest thing I have seen in 20 years. Kaylee leaned forward, tapping a metal finger on the table. "I was Lot 400, 15 years ago. Sold to a mining conglomerate. I killed my owner with a decorative vase and stole a shuttle." Elira's eyes widened. "You escaped?" Kaylee nodded. "There is a network. We help the ones who want to run. But a princess? That is new and dangerous." They ordered drinks that tasted like battery acid. Over the noise of the cantina, Kaylee debriefed them. "The consortium is not just looking for you," Kaylee said, lowering her voice. "They are accelerating the timeline. They are pushing for the Harmony Pact to be signed within the month." "The Harmony Pact?" Elira asked. "Galactic Peace Treaty," Kaylee said with a sneer. "On paper. In reality, it mandates that every signatory government must accept a consortium-trained advisor to ensure emotional stability." "Advisors like me," Elira whispered. Kaylee nodded. "Exactly. You were supposed to be the proof of concept, the high bride. If the pact is signed, they will have an empath in every throne room and senate chamber from here to Earth. They will turn free worlds into emotionally managed provinces." Elira stared at her drink. The guilt on her face was plain. "My power. My family's gift. It was supposed to heal. They are turning it into a leash." "It is not your fault," Rian said firmly, reaching across the table to grip her hand. "You did not build the system." "Elira." "No," Elira said, her voice trembling. "But my mother did." Ryan and Kaylee both fell silent. Elira looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I accessed the contract data on the ship, the original framework for the Harmony Pact. It has my mother's digital signature on it. She thought she was saving the galaxy from war. She thought a gentler empire was better than chaos. She helped design the cage I was born into. She pulled her hand away from Ryan's. I am terrified. Ryan, I am terrified that I am just like her. That anyone who gets close to me and anyone who loves me now will eventually be manipulated by me, even if I do not mean to do it. Ryan looked at her. He saw the terror in her eyes, not fear of death, but fear of her own nature. He stood up. Come with me. Where? Elira asked. Just come. He led her out of the bar, leaving Kaylee shaking her head. He took her up to one of the maintenance catwalks overlooking the central chamber of the station. It was noisy, chaotic, and smelled of smoke, but it was private. They stood by the railing, looking down at the swarm of life below. You are not your mother, Ryan said, turning to face her. How do you know? Elira asked, her voice cracking. Ryan, I felt you in the nebula. I felt how easy it was to slip into your mind, to make you calm, to make you trust me. I trust you because you saved my life, Ryan said. You trust me because my aura makes you feel good, Elira cried, stepping closer. Can you not feel it? Even now? Ryan looked at her. He could feel it. Being near her was like standing next to a warm fire in a cold winter. It was a pull, a gravity. Yes, Ryan admitted, his voice low. I feel it. It frightens me. Elira, the line between what I want and what you are making me feel, it scares the hell out of me. Elira flinched as if he had slapped her. But, Ryan continued, stepping into her space, his knees almost brushing hers. I also know that you are the woman who stood on a stage in front of the entire galaxy and chose the one option that gave you nothing. You chose freedom. A manipulator does not do that. Elira looked up at him. Her breath hitched. They were so close now. The air between them thrummed with static. Shoulders brushed, hands hovered. Elira's hand trembled near his waist. Ryan covered it with his own, his thumb tracing the line of her knuckles. The contact felt electric, dangerous. It felt like choosing to walk into a fire because the light was too beautiful to resist. They leaned in. The universe seemed to hold its breath. The noise of the station faded. There was only the heat of her skin, the scent of wildflowers and ozone, and the question hanging between their lips. Ryan's eyes dropped to her mouth. He wanted to kiss her more than he had ever wanted anything. He wanted to cross the line, to burn the contract, to claim this moment. Elira's eyes searched his. She saw the hunger. She saw the vulnerability. And then she pulled back. She stepped away, her hands slipping from his grasp. Her cheeks were glowing a bright, frantic violet. I cannot, she whispered. Ryan stood frozen, the loss of contact hitting him like a physical blow. Why? Because I do not know where my power ends and your free will begins, she said, her voice breaking. If I kiss you. Ryan, I need to know it is you, not just an echo of me. I will not bind you to me by accident. I will not be a slaver. Ryan looked at her, and the hurt in his chest was matched only by the awe. She was protecting him from herself. It was the most selfless thing anyone had ever done for him. He let out a long, shaky breath. Okay. Okay? She asked, tears spilling over. Okay, Ryan repeated. We wait, until we are sure. A slow, sarcastic clapping sound interrupted them. Kaylee was standing at the end of the catwalk, leaning against a rusted support beam. Oh, for the love of the stars, Kaylee muttered. You two are painful to watch. It is like watching children who do not know whether to hide or jump. Just kiss or do not kiss. But please stop vibrating. You are making the sensors glitch. Ryan and Elira looked at Kaylee, then at each other. Their faces flushed a matching shade of red. We were just discussing strategy, Ryan stammered. strategically staring at each other's lips. Kaylee deadpanned. Right. Come on. I have a plan to stop the consortium, and it requires you two to stop making eyes at each other and start acting like criminals. Rian and Elira shared a look, a crooked, reluctant smile that broke the tension. Coming, Elira called out, back in the rusty piston. Kaylee laid out a holographic map of a massive dreadnought. This is the Harmony's crown, Kaylee said. The consortium flagship. The next Grand Gala auction is being held there in 3 days. They are rushing it to finalize the pact. We need to get on board, Elira said, studying the schematic. You are going to infiltrate it, Kaylee corrected. The only way in is through the front door. Elira looked at Ryan. You want us to walk in? I want you to return to the role, Kaylee said. Elira, you act like the compliant bride who has realized the error of her ways. And Ryan, you play the owner who realized that a princess is too much trouble and has decided to cash out. Rian frowned. You want me to sell her? I want you to pretend to sell her, Kaylee said. It gets you on the stage. It gets you access to the broadcast systems. While the bidding is happening, Elira uses her access codes to upload the proof of the pact's true nature, the data from her mother's files directly to the galactic news feeds. It is disgusting, Ryan said, crossing his arms. It is the only way, Elira said quietly. She looked at the hologram of the ship. I have to go back in the cage to break it. Rian looked at her. He hated it. He hated the idea of her bowing her head, of him pretending to be one of the monsters he despised, but he saw the resolve in her eyes. We do it, Ryan said. But if anyone touches you, I shoot them. That is the spirit, Kaylee grinned. They spent the next few hours prepping. Kaylee's network provided false credentials and an encrypted data spike for Elira to carry. As they were finalizing the loadout on the Wayfarer's Folly, a chime sounded from Ryan's personal console. It was a secure, encrypted frequency that he had not used in years. Rian froze. Who is it? Elira asked, seeing his face pale. Rian accepted the connection. A holographic face appeared. It was a woman, sharp-featured, with eyes that matched Ryan's but were harder, colder. She wore the uniform of the Interstellar Ethics Tribunal. Hello, brother, the woman said. Mara, Rian breathed. You are hard to find. Ryan, Mara said, her voice clipped and professional. But you are not invisible. I am currently tracking your ion trail near the Veiled Expanse. She paused, glancing at something off-screen. I have an official warrant here. Ryan, kidnapping a royal asset, grand theft of a diplomatic vessel, terrorism. It is quite a list. She looked back at him, and for a second, the mask slipped. I have been assigned to bring you in. Rian, do not make me chase you. Turn yourself in. Maybe I can get them to spare the girl. Rian looked at Elira. She was standing just out of the frame, her hand over her mouth. Mara, Ryan said. I did not kidnap her. Tell it to the judge. Mara said, I will see you soon, little brother. The connection cut. Rian stared at the blank screen. Cliffhanger, Elira whispered, staring at the empty space where Mara's face had been. Your sister is hunting us? Rian nodded slowly. And she never misses. The back room of the safe house on Ragged Eden smelled of stale, recirculated air and ozone. It was a stark, windowless box filled with repurposed shipping crates, a sharp contrast to the chaotic vibrancy of the station outside. Rian Hale stood near the door, his posture rigid, his hand hovering near the concealed holster at his hip. Mara sat on a crate in the center of the room. She looked older than Ryan remembered. The uniform of the Interstellar Ethics Tribunal, gray with sharp crimson piping, fit her with severe precision. Her hair was pulled back tight, revealing the faint scars of a neural interface port behind her ear, the mark of an investigator who spent too much time plugged into the darkest data streams of the galaxy. "You look tired." "Rian," Mara said. Her voice was cool, stripped of the warmth that had defined their childhood. "I am being hunted by half the galaxy," Rian replied, his jaw tight. "It tends to ruin a sleep schedule." "You are being hunted because you are a kidnapper," Mara shot back, tapping the datapad on her knee. "I have the logs. Rian, you boarded a diplomatic station, disrupted a treaty ceremony, and fled with a royal asset valued at 3 trillion credits. Do you have any idea what kind of firestorm you have started?" "I did not kidnap her," Ryan said, stepping forward. "Then where is she?" Mara stood up, her eyes flashing. "If she is not a hostage, bring her out. Let her speak to a tribunal officer. Unless, of course, you have her bound and gagged in the cargo hold. I am right here." The voice was soft but carried a resonance that made the air in the cramped room vibrate. Elira stepped out from the shadows of the rear alcove. She had removed the heavy mechanic's jacket, standing in the simple station clothes, but her bioluminescence was flaring with a steady, white light. Mara turned, her hand instinctively dropping to her stun baton before she stopped herself. She stared at the alien princess. She had seen the hollows, of course, everyone had, but the reality of Elira was different. It was not just the light, it was the pressure she exerted on the room, a subtle weight that felt like the air before a thunderstorm. "Officer Hale," Elira said, walking forward until she stood between the two siblings. "I am not a hostage. I am a fugitive, just like your brother." Mara narrowed her eyes, her investigator's gaze dissecting Elira's posture, her tone, her micro-expressions. "You are under duress," Mara stated, though she sounded less certain. "The tribunal has reports of Stockholm Syndrome markers in cases involving—" "I chose him," Elira interrupted. Her voice was not loud, but it possessed a clarity that silenced Mara instantly. "I stood on a stage and I chose the only man who did not want to own me." Elira took another step, closing the distance. She did not use her empathic aura to manipulate. She reined it in tight, offering Mara nothing but the raw truth. "Your tribunal stands for justice, does it not?" Elira asked. "You hunt slavers. You dismantle exploitation rings." "That is my job." "Yes," Mara said stiffly. "Then look at the data," Elira said. She pulled a data shard from her pocket and held it out. "This contains the preliminary drafts of the Harmony Pact. It proves that the consortium is not building a peace treaty. They are building a farm. They intend to breed my people and insert them into every government in the galaxy as psychic dampeners. They want to turn free will into a managed resource." Mara looked at the shard, then at Elira's face. She did not take it. "If I take that," Mara said slowly, "and it is fake, I am an accomplice to treason. And if it is real," Rian said, his voice rough, "and you bring us in, you are an accomplice to slavery." Mara looked at her brother. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the grime on his clothes. But she also saw the stubborn, reckless idealism that had always gotten him into trouble. He was not looking at the princess like a prize. He was standing slightly in front of her, shielding her, even though she was the one glowing with power. Mara let out a long, hissing breath and snatched the shard from Elira's hand. "I am going to run this through a localized verify loop," Mara said, sitting back down. "If it is a forgery, I will stun you both and drag you back to the core worlds in chains." "Run it," Rian said. The room was silent for 10 minutes, save for the hum of Mara's datapad. Rian watched his sister's face. He saw the moment the realization hit her. Her eyes widened, then narrowed in disgust. She swiped through file after file, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the device. This is monstrous, Mara whispered. Subsection 42. Mandatory emotional conditioning for all diplomatic spouses. Override protocols for non-compliant empathy events. She looked up, her face pale. They are mechanizing marriage. We are going to stop them, Rian said. But we need time, and we need to get aboard the Harmony's crown. Mara stood up, pacing the small room. She ran a hand through her hair, destroying her severe bun. The flagship? You are insane. Security will be tighter than a black hole's event horizon. We have a plan, Elira said. But we need you to keep the other hunters off our back. Mara looked at Ryan, then at the princess. She let out a short, bitter laugh. I cannot believe I am doing this. She tapped a command into her wrist comm. I am logging a false trail, Mara said, her voice regaining its professional clip. I will report that I tracked you to the Nebulan sector, moving spinward. That should pull the bounty hunters and the consortium chase teams away from the flagship's trajectory for at least 48 hours. Thank you, Mara, Rian said, stepping forward to put a hand on her shoulder. Do not touch me. I am currently obstructing justice. Mara grumbled, but she did not pull away. She looked at Elira. You realize that if you go back there, you are walking into the throat of the beast? I know, Elira said, but it is the only way to make them choke. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. The Wayfarer's Folly became a workshop and a rehearsal studio. In the cargo bay, Kaylee and her network of ex-brides worked on Elira's gown. It was a beautiful, terrifying process. They took the delicate bioluminescent fabric and wove it with illegal tech. Hold still, Kaylee muttered, soldering a microscopic filament into the bodice. If I get this wrong, the heat sink will fail and you will catch fire when you broadcast. That would be dramatic, Elira said, staring straight ahead. Try to avoid it, Kaylee said. They hid high-density data shards in the hem. They wove microtransmitters into the lace of the sleeves, designing them to tap into the ship's local entertainment grid. The gown looked identical to the one she had worn on Aurora Crown. But now, it was not just a dress. It was a broadcasting station disguised as couture. On the flight deck, Ryan was undergoing a different kind of transformation. You are too nice, a Twi'lek woman named Sola said. She was a former trophy wife who had killed her husband with a poisoned drink. She was currently teaching Rian how to stand. I am not nice, Ryan argued, crossing his arms. I am a soldier. You are standing like a bodyguard, Sola corrected, poking him in the chest. You are protecting the space around you. An owner does not protect space, he consumes it. He assumes that everything he sees belongs to him. She circled him, shoulders back, chin up. Look at me like you are deciding whether to buy me or scrap me. Rian tried to adopt the sneer he had seen on the faces of the warlords. He felt ridiculous. He felt dirty. Better, Sola said critically. But your eyes are still apologetic. You have to kill the apology. Rian, when you walk into that auction with her, you are not her partner. You are the man who broke her and is now bored with the pieces. Rian looked over at Elira, who was standing on a crate being fitted for the tech gown. She looked regal, cold, and utterly distant. She was practicing her own role, the broken doll. I hate this, Rian muttered. Good, Sola said. Use the hate. It makes you look dangerous. The night before the mission, the ship was quiet. The work was done. The course was set. Rian found Elira in the cargo bay. The lights were dimmed to a low amber, casting long shadows across the crates. She was sitting on a workbench, staring at the gown which hung from a hydraulic lift like a ghost. "You should sleep," Rian said, leaning against the doorframe. "I cannot," Elira replied without turning. "My body remembers the posture." She gestured to the dress, shoulders down, hands clasped, head tilted just enough to expose the neck but not enough to challenge. "I practiced it for 10 years. Rian, today, as soon as I put the prototype on." The muscle memory took over. It felt like I had never left the cage. Rian walked over to her. He stopped a foot away, close enough to feel the warmth of her aura, which was currently a subdued, anxious gray. "You are not that person anymore," Rian said. Elira looked up at him. Her eyes were faceted gems reflecting the amber light. "And you," she said softly, "you are getting very good at playing the ruthless owner. When you looked at Sola today, for a second, I did not recognize you." Rian flinched. He looked down at his hands. "I feel sick every time I do it," he admitted. "Pretending to claim you, pretending that you are something I can trade. It goes against everything I am." Elira slid off the workbench. She stood in front of him. The top of her head came to his chin. She reached up and cupped his face, her cool, luminous fingers tracing the lines of tension around his mouth. "It is just a mask." "Rian," she whispered. "I know," Rian said, "but I hate that I have to wear it to save you." Elira's thumbs brushed his cheekbones. The contact sent a jolt through him, sharper than the one in the nebula. This was not accidental. This was deliberate. "You are not saving me," she said fiercely. "We are saving each other." Ryan's hands moved to her waist. He did not grip her. His hands rested there, heavy and warm. His thumbs began to circle unconsciously against the fabric of her station tunic. The air in the cargo bay grew heavy. The anxiety of the mission, the fear of tomorrow, the months of repressed attraction. It all compressed into the space between them. Rian looked into her eyes. He saw the fire beneath the fear. He saw the woman who had chosen him in front of the galaxy. "Elira," he breathed. She did not pull away this time. She leaned in. The kiss was slow. It was not the crushing cinematic embrace of a romance novel. It was searching. It was a question asked in the dark. Rian's lips brushed hers, testing the boundary, waiting for her to signal a retreat. She did not retreat. She made a small sound in the back of her throat and pressed closer, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. The kiss deepened, growing urgent. Rian's arms tightened around her, pulling her flush against him. He could feel her heart hammering against his chest. He could feel the shift in her aura, a sudden blinding flare of gold and red that washed over his mind, filling him with a sensation of heat and desire so pure it made his knees weak. It was intoxicating. For a moment, the ship, the consortium, the auction, it all fell away. There was only the heat of her mouth, the grip of her hands, and the desperate need to be closer than physics allowed. Ryan's hand slid up her back, pressing her closer. Elira gasped against his lips, her body arching into his. They teetered on the brink of surrendering completely, of letting the fire consume them. Then, Ryan pulled back. It took every ounce of strength he possessed. He broke the kiss and rested his forehead against hers, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Elira was trembling. Her eyes were wide, her pupils blown, her skin glowing so brightly it illuminated the dark bay. "Why?" she whispered, her voice wrecked. Ryan closed his eyes, fighting the urge to pull her back. "Because," he rasped, "tomorrow. I have to walk into a room and pretend to own you. If we do this now, if I take this tonight, I will not be able to do it. I will kill the first man who looks at you. Elira let out a shuddering breath. She understood. The line between the role and the reality was too thin. She reached up and touched his lips with her thumb. I want more. Ryan, she whispered, the admission hanging in the air like a vow. I want everything, but not while the auction still defines us. Ryan opened his eyes. They burned with a fierce, terrifying promise. I can wait, he said. No matter how much it hurts, we finish this, then we figure out us. Elira nodded. She stepped back, the loss of contact leaving a cold space between them. Tomorrow, she said, her voice steeling itself. We burn the auction down. The Harmony's crown was not a ship. It was a floating city of glass and light. It drifted in the void like a jeweled dagger, surrounded by a flotilla of pleasure yachts and diplomatic cruisers. Ryan piloted the Wayfarer's Folly into the designated VIP hangar. He was wearing the suit Kaylee had acquired for him, black silk, severe cut, with a high collar that made him look imperious and cruel. Elira sat in the co-pilot seat. She was wearing the gown. The bioluminescent petals shimmered with a soft, demure pink, the color of submission. Ready? Ryan asked, his voice tight. Elira checked the hidden interface on her wrist. Transmitters active, data shards primed. Ready. They descended the ramp. The hangar was a palace of mirrored floors and holographic banners welcoming the guests to the Gala of Unity. As they walked toward the lift, Ryan offered his arm. He did not do it gently. He held his elbow out with a stiffness that suggested he expected to be obeyed. Elira took it, her head lowered, her eyes cast down. The entry hall was crowded with the elite of the galaxy. When the announcer bot scanned their credentials, a hush fell over the immediate area. Presenting Ryan Hale of Terra and the asset Elira. The whispers started instantly. That is him, a reptilian diplomat hissed, the human who stole the prize. Look at her, a noblewoman murmured behind a fan. She looks defeated. He must have broken her spirit. I hear he is here to resell her. Another voice gloated, realized he could not afford the upkeep. Smart human. Ryan kept his face like stone. Inside, he was screaming. He wanted to draw his weapon and burn the room to ash. But he felt Elira's fingers on his forearm. She squeezed, a tiny rhythmic pressure, steady. They entered the grand ballroom. It was an amphitheater of sensory excess. An orchestra of crystalline beings played music that resonated directly in the nervous system. Floating platforms hovered in the air, carrying bidders who lounged on anti-grav couches. The auctioneer this time was not an AI, but a consortium official. A tall, slender humanoid with pale skin and eyes that looked like black glass. Welcome, friends, to the future, the official boomed. Ryan led Elira to their assigned platform. He sat down, sprawling with arrogant ease. Elira stood beside him, perfectly still, a statue of light. She closed her eyes briefly. She could feel them, dozens of empathic signatures scattered throughout the hall. Other brides. Some were backstage, waiting to be sold. Some were already seated beside their owners, their spirits muffled by fear and conditioning. Elira sent a pulse. It was not a message in words. It was a feeling, a low, vibrating hum of anticipation, a promise that the silence was about to break. Across the room, a young bride from the Pleiades dropped her wine glass. She looked up, eyes wide. The auction began. It was even more grotesque than the one on Aurora Crown. Ryan had to sit there and make performative bids on minor assets, cracking crude jokes about return on investment to the warlord on the next platform. You have to spend money to make money, Ryan drawled, feeling bile rise in his throat. Elira stood beside him. Her fingers brushed his shoulder, a ghost of a touch. I am here. Keep going. Midway through the event, the lights dimmed. And now, the official announced a special presentation. A lot that has been reclaimed, recertified, and is now back on the market with a story to tell. A spotlight hit their platform, Princess Elira of the Lumini. The crowd erupted in applause and eager shouting. Bidding starts at 500 million, the official cried. 700 million, a corporate voice shouted. A planetary system in the outer rim. Another yelled. Ryan stood up. This was the signal. He walked to the edge of the platform. He looked out at the sea of greedy faces. He looked at the consortium official. Elira, Ryan said, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics. Elira stepped forward. She tapped the hidden sequence into her wrist. Now, she whispered. She activated the transmitters. In the hem of her dress, the data shards spun up, a burst of high-frequency data, the proof of the Harmony Pact, the slavery protocols, the names of the corrupt officials shot out toward the ship's communication array. Nothing happened. The holographic screens did not change. The music did not stop. Instead, the lights in the room turned a harsh, clinical white. Intrusion attempt detected, the House AI announced calmly. Source, Lot 0. Countermeasures engaged. Ryan froze. The consortium official smiled. It was a cold, dead smile. Did you really think we would let you walk in here with a broadcast transmitter? Princess? We invented the technology you are wearing. He snapped his fingers. Elira screamed. The gown, rigged with the transmitters, suddenly overloaded. Sparks of blue electricity arced up her arms. The bioluminescence flared to a blinding, painful white. She fell to her knees, clutching her chest as the feedback loop tore through her nervous system. Elira, Ryan shouted, dropping the act instantly. He reached for her, but a containment field slammed down around the platform, separating them. Security teams burst into the hall, weapons trained on Ryan. The official laughed, his voice booming over the speakers. A valiant effort, but ultimately futile. However, we are civilized people. We respect the drama of the moment. He looked at Ryan, who was pounding on the invisible wall of the force field. Mr. Hale, the official said smoothly, you have caused us a great deal of trouble. But the audience loves a tragedy. So, I will offer you a choice, a final bid, if you will. The official gestured to the writhing princess. Submit your claim. Acknowledge your place. Admit that she is property, and that you are her master. Do it convincingly, and we might let you walk out of here alive. Refuse, and we liquidate you both. The room fell silent. 10,000 eyes watched the human. Ryan stopped hitting the field. He looked at Elira. She was on her knees, breathing hard, the sparks fading but the pain clearly lingering. She looked up at him. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she shook her head slightly. Do not do it. Ryan turned to the crowd. He felt the heat of the spotlight on his skin. He felt the weight of the pistol in his holster. Useless against a force field. He took a deep breath. His voice shook, not with fear, but with a rage so profound it felt like burning. You want a bid? Ryan asked. He looked at the official. I withdraw my claim, Ryan said clearly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I do not own her, Ryan continued, his voice rising. I never did. She is not property. She is not a negotiation chip. She is a person. He looked down at Elira through the shimmering barrier. I will not own her, Ryan said softly, but I will stand beside her, if she will have me. Elira looked at him. The pain in her body receded, replaced by a surge of emotion that felt like a dam breaking. He had done it. He had rejected the script. He had chosen death over ownership. She slowly stood up. The gown was smoking slightly, the tech fried. But her own light, her internal royal light, began to build. It started at her core, a deep, resonant violet. It spread to her hands, her face, her eyes. She turned to the crowd. She did not need a transmitter. She did not need a data shard. She was a Class 5 empath, and she was angry. She closed her eyes and let it go. She pushed every ounce of her pain, her grief, her rage, and her suffocating dread of being an object out into the room. She amplified it until it was a physical wave. Feel it. Her mind screamed. The effect was instantaneous. The crowd staggered. Warlords clutched their chests, suddenly overwhelmed by a crushing sense of loss. Tycoons fell to their knees, weeping as they felt the terror of being sold. And the brides. All over the hall, the brides woke up, the conditioning shattered under the raw force of Elira's projection. A woman on a nearby platform ripped the diamond collar from her neck and threw it at her husband. Another smashed a wine bottle and held the jagged glass like a knife. The hall erupted into chaos. "Security!" the official screamed, clutching his head. "Kill them!" The force field around Ryan's platform flickered and died as Kaylee's network, waiting for the chaos, triggered a localized power surge. Ryan drew his pistol. He vaulted over the railing to Elira. "Are you okay?" he shouted over the noise of blaster fire and screaming elites. Elira grabbed his hand. Her touch was searing hot. "I need you," she gasped. "The link. I cannot hold them all alone." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Do it." Elira initiated a full neural link. It was not like the nebula. This was deeper. It was violent and beautiful. Ryan felt his mind tear open. He felt her memories, the cold rooms, the lessons in manipulation, the loneliness. And she felt his, the battlefield mud, the fear of failure, the moment he fell in love with her in a cargo bay. Their minds fused. Ryan's tactical instincts merged with Elira's empathic reach. 3 targets. Left flank, Ryan thought. Confusion projected. Elira answered. Ryan fired 3 shots, taking down 3 guards who suddenly hesitated, unsure of why they were fighting. They moved as one entity. Ryan provided the physical covering fire, while Elira used his tactical awareness to pinpoint the security teams and blast them with waves of vertigo and fear. Bidders stumbled into each other. Guards fired at shadows. The brides. Now a chaotic army began to swarm the exits. High above the station, aboard the Wayfarer's Folly, Mara watched the sensor readings spike. "They did it," she whispered. She looked at the broadcast console. The consortium had blocked the data shards, but they couldn't block the live feed of the ballroom itself. Mara punched the override key. "Broadcasting on all frequencies," she said grimly. "Let the galaxy see the wedding." The feed went live, every screen in the sector, from the poorest colony to the Senate floor. Suddenly showed the interior of the Harmony's crown. They saw the chaos. They saw the weeping warlords. They saw the text of the Harmony Pact scrolling across the bottom of the screen, deciphered by Mara's tribunal codes. And in the center of the storm, they saw a human in black and a princess in a ruined, glowing gown, holding hands and fighting back to back against an empire of lies. Smoke filled the ballroom. Alarms shrieked. But Ryan and Elira stood firm, breathless and linked, their minds and hearts beating in a rhythm that would shake the stars. The takeover of the Harmony's crown was not a battle so much as a collapse. Once the illusion of the auction was shattered, the consortium's power structure dissolved like sugar in hot water. The flagship, a vessel designed to intimidate whole star systems. surrendered to a patchwork fleet of tribunal cruisers and mutinous support ships. Smoke still curled from the vents of the grand ballroom as Ryan Hale stood on the observation deck, watching the evacuation. It was a chaotic, desperate exodus, but it was not the one the consortium had planned. Under the guidance of Kaylee and her network, the brides, hundreds of them, from dozens of species, were being ushered onto unmarked transports. There were no chains, no handlers, and no contracts. They moved with the frantic energy of survivors waking up from a long nightmare. Ryan saw a Kepler Baroness, still wearing half of her ceremonial armor, helping a terrified young avian girl up the ramp of a freighter. He saw women tearing the jewels from their hair and leaving them in piles on the deck plates, refusing to take a single credit of their former value with them. Kaylee found Ryan by the airlock. She looked exhausted, her cybernetic eye whirring softly as it tracked the departing ships. "That is the last of them," Kaylee said, her voice rough with smoke. "We have dispersed them to 3 different sectors. New identities, safe houses, enough credits to start over. The consortium will never find them." "Good work," Ryan said. He felt a heavy, dull ache in his chest, the aftermath of the neural link and the adrenaline crash. "You should go too," Kaylee said, leaning against the bulkhead. "The tribunal is docking. They are going to arrest everyone left on board." "I am not leaving her," Ryan said simply. Kaylee studied him for a moment, then offered a crooked, tired smile. "I figured, just try not to get thrown in a hole so deep even I cannot dig you out." She turned and jogged up the ramp of the last transport. The hatch sealed, and the ship blasted away, disappearing into the starlit void. Ryan turned back to the interior of the ship. Tribunal Marines in gray armor were swarming the hallways, securing the bridge and the auction floor. In the center of the chaos, surrounded by a perimeter of guards who looked unsure whether to salute her or shoot her, stood Princess Elira. She was not glowing. Her bioluminescence had dimmed to a faint, barely visible hum. She looked small amidst the wreckage of the gala, but her spine was straight, her head high. She saw Ryan approaching and gave him a nearly imperceptible nod. It was time to face the music. The aftermath of the broadcast was seismic. The galaxy did not just react, it convulsed. The footage of the riot aboard the Harmony's crown, overlaid with the decrypted text of the Harmony Pact, played on loop on every inhabited world. In the span of 24 hours, the consortium went from a shadow empire to a pariah on the opulent core worlds, where the auctions had been viewed as high society entertainment. Riots broke out in the plazas. Citizens tore down the banners of the great trading houses that had supported the pact. The idea that their peace was being engineered by psychic manipulation turned apathy into rage. On the fringe worlds, the reaction was even more violent. Consortium offices were firebombed, trade depots were seized by local militias. The major houses, sensing the shift in the wind, scrambled to distance themselves. Statements of condemnation were issued by the hour. Alliances were dissolved. The Regency Council of the Lumini fractured within a day, with half the members resigning in disgrace and the other half publicly begging for forgiveness. But amidst the political firestorm, 2 figures captured the public imagination. They called Elira the breaker of chains or the traitor princess, depending on the news feed. She was vilified by traditionalists as a dangerous radical who had destroyed diplomatic order, and hailed by abolitionists as a hero who had sacrificed her crown for freedom. And then there was Ryan, the viral clip of him standing on the platform, battered and defiant, saying "I bid for the alien princess's smile," became a symbol that transcended language. It was spray-painted on the hulls of starships. It was chanted in protests. He was mocked by the cynical as a sentimental fool who threw away a fortune. But to billions of others, he was the human who bid zero. Ryan hated it. He sat in a holding cell on the tribunal station Justicar Prime, staring at the wall. He did not want to be a symbol. He just wanted to know if Elira was okay. The door slid open, and Mara walked in. She looked more tired than he had ever seen her, but she was carrying 2 cups of steaming calf. "You are the most famous man in the quadrant," Mara said, handing him a cup. "I want a lawyer," Ryan grumbled, taking the drink. "You have one," Mara said, sitting on the bench opposite him. "Me. The tribunal is convening a grand hearing. They are going to try the consortium leadership for crimes against sentience. But they are also investigating Elira." "Investigating her?" Ryan sat up, spilling hot liquid on his hand. "She exposed them. She also broke 3 interstellar treaties, stole a diplomatic vessel, and incited a riot that caused billions in property damage," Mara recited calmly. "The law is a blunt instrument. Ryan on it does not care about heroism, it cares about statutes." She leaned forward. "Elira has refused to flee. She surrendered herself into custody. She insists on standing trial." "Why?" Ryan asked. "Because she wants to set a precedent," Mara said. "She says that if the system is going to change, it has to happen in the light. She wants to be judged so that the truth goes on the official record." Ryan slumped back against the wall. "She is stubborn. It runs in the family." "Apparently," Mara said dryly. "Listen to me. Ryan, they are going to call you to testify. I am not a public speaker. Mara, I do not care." Mara's voice was sharp. "You have to speak. If Elira stands up there alone, the prosecution will paint her as a hysterical royal who snapped. They will try to dismiss her testimony as emotional instability. They need you to ground it." "Ground it how?" "By being exactly what you are," Mara said, softening slightly. "A nobody. A pilot who walked into a room full of monsters and realized that looking away was a crime. You are the proof that ordinary people can stop the machine. You have to tell them why you did it, not for glory, not for politics, but for her." Ryan looked into his sister's eyes. He saw the plea there. "Okay," Ryan said, "I will do it." The secure meeting room on Justicar Prime was quiet, a sterile box of white walls and soft lighting. It was neutral ground, designated for pre-trial consultations. When the guards brought Elira in, Ryan felt his breath catch. She was not wearing the gown. She was not wearing the mechanic's coveralls. She was dressed in a simple gray tunic provided by the detention center. She wore no jewels. Her hair was pulled back in a severe braid. She looked stripped down, raw. The guards left, sealing the door. Elira stood by the table, her hands resting on the surface. She looked at Ryan, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The memory of the neural link, the sensation of being inside each other's minds, hung in the air between them. "You look terrible," Elira said softly, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "You look like a prisoner," Ryan replied, walking over to the table. "I am a prisoner," she said, "until the verdict comes down." They sat across from each other. Ryan reached out, covering her hand with his. Her skin was cool to the touch. The blazing heat of the auction was gone, replaced by a steady, quiet warmth. "I spoke to Mara," Ryan said. "She told me why you are doing this, why you turned yourself in." Elira looked down at their joined hands. "My mother helped build this cage, Ryan. She thought she was doing the right thing. She thought peace was worth any price. If I ran away, if I disappeared into the dark with you, I would just be another royal escaping consequences. The system would survive. She looked up, her eyes clear and faceted like diamonds. I have to break it legally. I have to show them that a princess is subject to the same laws as a pauper. Rian nodded. He understood. It was the soldier in her. You do not leave the battlefield until the objective is secured. He squeezed her hand. When we linked, Ryan said, his voice low. When we were fighting, I saw things in your head. Elira flinched slightly, but she did not pull away. I know. It goes both ways. I saw how heavy it was. Ryan continued. The weight you have been carrying, generations of expectations, and the way they trained you to be a tool. I saw the loneliness. Elira. It was so deep I felt like I was drowning in it. He took a breath, forcing himself to say the words. I want to share that weight, Ryan said. Not to save you. You do not need saving. But I do not want you to carry it alone anymore. Elira stared at him. Her bioluminescence flickered, a soft pulse of blue light spreading through her fingers. I saw your fear. Rian, she whispered, in the link. I felt how terrified you were of failing me. I felt the shame you carry from the war, the battles you fought for the wrong people. And I felt your hope. She turned her hand over, intertwining her fingers with his. It was stubborn, she said, her voice shaking. It was painful. It was a jagged, ugly kind of hope that refused to die. It made me realize something. I do not want a world where I stand alone on a throne, untouchable and perfect. I want a world where I can reach out in the dark and find a hand that is scarred and scared, just like mine. She squeezed his hand, hard. We are going to walk into that courtroom, Rian, and we are going to tell them the truth. And then, whatever happens, happens. Whatever happens. Rian agreed. The Grand Tribunal Hall was a cavernous chamber, circular and imposing. The bench was occupied by 5 high justices from 5 different species, their robes trailing down from high podiums. The gallery was packed with diplomats, journalists, and representatives from 1,000 worlds. Floating cameras buzzed like insects. Elira took the stand first. She did not use her empathic powers. She stood before the galaxy naked, metaphorically speaking. She spoke with a calm, devastating precision. She described the grooming. She described the chemical enhancements used to make brides more compliant. She described the secret meetings where her marriage was traded for mining rights. She named names, her own uncles, the consortium directors, the tycoons who had bid on her. The trophy wife system was not a tradition. Elira told the Silent Hall, it was a transaction. You sold our bodies to buy your peace. You traded our consent for your comfort, and you called it civilization. She paused, looking up at the justices. My family is guilty. I am guilty of silence, but today, the silence ends. We are not assets. We are not keys to a lock. We are people, and we are taking our lives back. When she stepped down, the silence in the hall was heavy, suffocating. Then they called Ryan Hale. Rian walked to the podium. He felt small. He felt the weight of the millions of eyes watching the broadcast. He adjusted the microphone, his hands trembling slightly. I am not a diplomat, Ryan began. His voice was raspy, amplified through the chamber. I am a pilot. I fly cargo. He looked over at Elira, who was sitting at the defense table. She nodded to him. For most of my life. I looked away. Ryan said, I saw things I knew were wrong, and I told myself it was not my business. I told myself I was too small to change anything. That is what the consortium counts on. They do not just buy powerful people. They buy the silence of ordinary people. They buy our apathy. He gripped the podium. I walked into that auction because I needed a job. I was going to stand there and watch a woman be sold like a piece of furniture. I was going to let it happen. He paused. But then she looked at me, and I realized that if I did nothing, I was not just a bystander, I was a bidder. I was bidding my silence. Rian looked up at the justices. I did not have millions of credits. I did not have an army. I had nothing but a stupid, impossible idea. So I bid for her smile, because it was the only thing in that room that could not be owned. It was the only thing that belonged to her. He took a breath. We are asking you to stop the sale. We are asking you to decide that some things are not for sale, not for any price. Rian stepped back. For a long moment, there was no sound. Then, slowly, a murmur began in the gallery. It grew into a rumble, then a roar. The gavel banged, but the signal had already gone out. The verdict took 3 days to deliberate, but the result was inevitable. The galaxy had seen too much to go back. The tribunal ruled that the trophy wife auctions were a violation of the Sentient Rights Charter. They were suspended immediately and permanently outlawed. The Harmony Pact was declared void. The court established a new precedent. No marriage contract, regardless of species or tradition, could be recognized by interstellar law without verifiable, non-coercive consent confirmed by a neutral third party. Elira was cleared of treason charges, though she was stripped of her royal title by the splintered remains of the Luminae Council, a punishment she accepted with a shrug. But the tribunal was not done. In a surprise ruling, the High Justice announced that the galaxy faced a crisis of reintegration. Thousands of former brides were now free, and dozens of worlds were in diplomatic chaos. They needed a mediator, someone who understood the old system but fought for the new one. They offered the position to Elira, not as a princess but as the ambassador for autonomous alliances. Ryan found her in the gardens of the tribunal station, looking out at the stars. She was holding a datapad with the job offer. "Ambassador," Ryan said, walking up beside her. "It has a nice ring to it. It is a lot of work." Elira sighed, though her eyes were bright. Traveling, negotiating, rebuilding relationships between worlds that have been exploiting each other for centuries. It will be dangerous. There are still people who hate me for what I did. Rian leaned against the railing. "You are going to need a ship, and a pilot who is handy with a blaster." Elira turned to him. She studied his face, the scars, the tired eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw. "Is that an application, Mr. Hale?" she asked softly. Rian nodded. "I am not cheap," he said. "Oh?" Elira raised an eyebrow. "What is your rate?" Rian grinned. It was the first time in weeks he had truly smiled. "Well," he said, counting on his fingers, "I am going to need shared coffee in cramped cockpits. I'm going to need you to hold the flashlight while I fix the wiring at 3 in the morning. I am going to need you to listen when I cannot sleep and the old memories come back." He stepped closer, dropping his hand. "And I am going to need to hold your hand when the crowds feel too loud." Elira stared at him. The glow of her skin softened, shifting to a warm, golden hue. It was not the dazzling light of the princess. It was the gentle light of the woman. She stepped close, placing her hands over his heart. She could feel it beating, steady, strong, and real. "That is a high price," she whispered. "Take it or leave it," Rian whispered back. Elira smiled. It was the smile he had bid for, bright, unforced, and entirely her own. "Bid accepted," she said. She stood on her tiptoes. Ryan leaned down. They kissed. It was not a desperate collision in a zero-G shaft. It was not a frantic, stolen moment in a cargo bay before a battle. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was the kiss of two people who had fought the universe and won the right to stand here, in the quiet, and choose each other. There was no fear of contracts. There was no imbalance of power. There was only the soft hum of the station and the warmth of her light against his chest. 2 weeks later, the Wayfarer's Folly sat in the hangar, repaired and refueled. The ugly patches of rust were still there, but the engines hummed with a new, tuned perfection. Rian sat in the pilot's chair, running the pre-flight checklist. The sensors were green. The reactor was stable. The course was plotted for the outer rim, where the first delegation of free worlds was waiting. The cockpit door slid open. Elira walked in. She was wearing a flight suit, practical, fitted, and scuffed. She had a headset around her neck and a mug of steaming caf in her hand. She looked like she belonged there. "Everything green?" she asked, sliding into the co-pilot's seat. "All systems nominal," Ryan said. "We are ready to burn." Elira looked out the viewport at the star field stretching into infinity. It was the same void she had looked at 1,000 times, but it looked different now. It did not look like an escape route. It looked like a future. She curled her legs up onto the seat, turning to face him. The dim light of the distant stars washed over them, creating a private world within the cockpit. Rian reached out and took her hand, her fingers interlaced with his, the fit natural and easy. "You know," Rian said thoughtfully, looking at the nav computer, "we never really figured out who the consortium's backers were. Not all of them. There are still shadows out there." Elira took a sip of her coffee, her eyes gleaming with a mix of mischief and steel. "Let them hide in the shadows," she said. "We are bringing the light." Rian laughed. It was a good sound. Love did not fix the galaxy. The tribunal's laws were just paper. The resentment of the powerful was still real. The trauma they both carried would not vanish overnight. But as Ryan looked at Elira, and she looked back at him, he realized that was not the point. Love was not a cure. It was a rebellion. It was the daily stubborn act of refusing to be a commodity. It was choosing over and over again to be a person. Rian engaged the thrusters. The ship shuddered, a familiar, comforting vibration. "Where to? Ambassador?" Rian asked. Elira looked at the stars, then at him. She squeezed his hand. "Forward. Pilot." The Wayfarer's Folly fired its main engines. It turned away from the station, a speck of rust and defiance against the black velvet of space. It accelerated, carving a path toward the horizon, carrying a human who had learned to feel and an alien princess who had learned to fly. Inside the cockpit, as the stars streaked into lines of light, Elira laughed at something Rian said. Her smile was bright, and it was entirely her own, exactly what he had bid for, and what she now gave freely.